Marvin Redpost, Class President by Lucy Carr. Chapter 5. More news people came from other TV stations. They all crowded into the back of the room. There were 3 television cameras and also a photographer from the newspaper. Mrs. North went ahead with their arithmetic lesson. They seemed learning to add big numbers. Mrs. North put a problem on the board. She said the numbers out loud. 63,888,227 plus 17,106,547. Marvin's mouth dropped open. He had never heard anyone ask such big numbers. "Marvin," said Mrs. North, "would you like to come to the board and give us the answer?" He closed his mouth. Then he stood up and made his way to the board. He looked at the problem. It was impossible. Mrs. North gave him a "you-can-do" smile. He looked at the people back of the room. They were all watching him. The 3 television cameras was pointed at him. He looked back at the problem. You added just like smaller numbers," Mrs. North gently reminded him. "Start at the ones column." He stared blankly at the board. 7 plus 7, said Mrs. North. His brain had turned off. "Don't think about the cameras," said Mrs. North. 7 plus 7, Marvin. Marvin looked around helplessly. Casey Hopperton was making funny faces at him. She stretched her mouth in different directions. He thought she was making fun of him. Then he realized her mouth was forming the word 14 over and over again. 14, he said. "Good," said Mrs. North. He wrote the number 4 and carried the 1. His brain started working again. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 1 is 7. He put 7 in the next column. He carefully went through the board, one step at a time. He was almost finished when there was a knock at the door. Mr. McKay, the principal, opened the door and said, Excuses, do you mind me come in?" Another man was with him. Marvin was pretty sure the other man was the president. Mrs. North said, "Welcome." She wiggled her hand behind her back, signaling the class to stand. Marvin was already standing, but he stood straighter. Everyone clapped as the other man walked into the classroom. "Thank you," he said. "Please sit down." Marvin didn't know what to do. He didn't want to disobey the president, but he had been standing before the president came. "This is Mrs. North," said Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe wore a long-sleeved shirt. He had a hole over his pink bunny elbow. "I heard wonderful things about you," said the president. He shook Mrs. North's hand. Marvin couldn't believe it. His teacher was really shaking the president's hand. "Thank you," said Mrs. North. We are all delighted you are here." The president turned and looked at Marvin. "Those are big numbers," he said. Marvin didn't know what to say. Did you add those by yourself?" "It's not finished," said Marvin. The president smiled. "Well, go ahead, finish." Marvin took a deep breath and exhaled. He looked back at the problem on the board. He'd lost his place. He had to start back at the beginning to add the numbers in his head. He finished the problem. The president looked it over. "What's your name?" he asked. Marvin's brain turned off again, but then it came back. Marvin Redpost." "Good job, Marvin," said the president. He held out his hand. Marvin shook hands with the president.